I don't say, what is my integrity? I say, what does it look like for me to be in integrity? And what that means is for my actions to match my words. If you were to follow me around with a video camera all day, wouldn't match who I say I am to myself, wouldn't match who I know my best self to be, wouldn't maybe match who I project myself out to others, God knows, on Instagram or whatever. And so we're out of integrity when, we reject an Instagram life that's like radically different from our reality. Being a person of honor is to have a code of behavior, an ethic of behavior that you can actually talk about and cite and that guide your actions. And too often, especially in our society, I see people just acting. I don't break the law much. I don't do harm, mostly, I guess. Well, at least we know. And otherwise, I just do my thing. That's not really acting in a code. It's much less trustworthy to me.
How do you discover what your own integrity is?
I think of integrity, integrity is very literally wholeness. Integrity is the state of being our full and most authentically self-expressed self. That was a tautology. Our most authentically. and so more concretely, I don't say, what is my integrity? I say, what does it look like for me to be in integrity? That means is for my actions to match my words. What I do every day to match who I say I am, also to myself, right? If it's important for me to be spiritually developing and I'm not praying or going to my temple or cultivating my relationship to God at all, I might not be hurting anybody actively, but I am out of integrity. If it's really important to me to be present in my life, and even more than that, if it's really important to me to be constantly growing and sucking the marrow out of the bones of existence, and I haven't traveled or adventured or lived, and I'm constantly numbing myself with drugs or alcohol or TV or pornography, I might not be hurting anybody. But I am out of my integrity. Actions are not matching my words. My lived reality, my daily experience, right? If you were to follow me around with a video camera all day, wouldn't match who I say I am to myself, wouldn't match who I know my best self to be, wouldn't maybe match who I project myself out to others, God knows, on Instagram or whatever. Like, what is the, and so we're out of integrity when, we reject an Instagram life that's like radically different from our reality. I think that's, listen, I'm not going to die on that hill, but I do think that there's something like that where social media is training us to be constantly out of integrity, constantly match our reality. And the only alternative to do that is to use social media to share all of your inner details to get around that or to get away from that and actually say, this is my messy, complicated, multifaceted reality. But that means that you have to share all of your reality with the world. And so those are kind of your options.
Yeah.
Hot take. Some of the many influences that influence this were, the mythopoetic men's movement, Mankind Project in particular, really but was one of the pillars of the imperative to be in integrity. And one of the biggest ways to do that is to honor your word. Honor your word. A lot of being in integrity just comes down to are you someone who keeps their promises? Are you someone who does what they say they're going to do? There's also a deep practice that I learned from my background as a life coach and my coach training with the Academy for Coaching Excellence. This woman, Maria Nemeth, who was the founder of that school, who came up with the idea of defining your own standards of integrity, not leaving it up to society or to your partner right now to tell you what's right or wrong. Finding for yourself, what are my actual values? That leap and saying, what do I actually intrinsically believe is important? And it can be incredibly confronting. There's times, and I've worked with clients where you know what, it's really just not that important to me to prioritize safety when I'm running workshops, or it's really just not that important to me to avoid harm as a stand-up comedian. I don't mind insulting other, you know what I mean? But this at least gives us the clarity to see oh, wow, okay, that's a value that you don't really have, that everybody thinks that you should have, everybody gets offended that you don't have, but you don't really have, right? But inevitably, we have, we exist in a, we're incredibly complex creatures. So staying in integrity for that comedian is a great example. It's important to me to be subversive as a comedian, say. It's important to me to push buttons and push boundaries. That's where I know I'm in my zone of genius. It's where I know I'm making the contribution that I'm here to make in the world. And if some people get hurt along the way, some people, some feelings get hurt, I'm okay with that. Very clear. What are the other values that you have in your world? Important is not doing harm. Well, you're okay with offending some people, but maybe not stabbing people. Okay, so there's somewhere in there is a real value that you hold
Right.
around not harming.
Right.
Can you reconcile and be in that project? Be in the project of reconciling your values when they're not obviously synced, when they're in conflict, right? I have a value of being explorative, but I also have a value of building community. Ugh, tension. I have a value of like being fully expressed in my sexuality, but my partner really, really doesn't want to play in the same way. Or I have a, like our values also like often conflict. And to be a person of integrity is to be in that constant awareness and that dance of like, okay, like where am I radically out of integrity? Where am I like, can I, what does that balance look like in this particular context, in this particular situation? What is the hill that I'm willing to die on? What is the hill that I'm not? I think we all must have a code of behavior. And I think, I mean, not to be gender essentialist here, but I think part of, oh God, am I going to really, okay, fine. Part of being a man is to have a code, being a person, frankly, of honor. It's really not about men, but being a person of honor is to have a code of behavior, an ethics of behavior that you can actually talk about and cite and that guide your actions. And too often, especially in our society, I see people just acting. Oh, much. I don't do harm. Well, mostly, I guess. Well, at least we know. And otherwise, I just whatever. I just do my thing. But that's not really acting in a code.
Yeah.
I don't. It's much less trustworthy to me. So when I respond to people who are like, you know what, it's really, who like come to me and say, hey man, like, I really wanted to come to that event and like be supportive to you, and my wife just had a baby, and it's like I know I committed to it, but I really can't. And for me to feel that it bothers them, and also for me to feel their dignity and like honor, like, you know what, they're prioritizing their wife, like very good, sounds
Yeah.
good, and their baby, like okay, like I just had this happen this week, and I could feel this brother of mine, this friend who like he just had a baby, and of course he wanted to show up for this event that I asked him to help me facilitate this weekend. And he just sensed into his own capacity, and he called me up ahead of time, and I could feel that it weighed on him. I could feel that he like weighed his conflicting responsibilities to keep his word or to honor his family, and me landed really trustworthy.
Yeah. Beautiful. I To go back to your earlier question about making it the more personal journey component, I think that what I would love to know is how did you get started in this work initially, and what brought you to it? Was there a moment where you felt out of integrity? Did somebody just invite you to Mankind Project? Like, how did you actually get started in this, and like, how did that begin for you?
Oh, it's such an expansive question. I've always been a really oriented towards service. I grew up with a lot of privilege and capacity, and yet, so I've always been in the nonprofit world or like in public service, but I wasn't. I was also really, I was really bad at it.
Hmm.
I kept on getting fired. I was difficult to manage. I was stubborn and obstinate and really opinionated and not, frankly, particularly aware of my privilege and resistant to narratives of privilege. And Um, uh, yeah, I was raised really liberal, and so I had this kind of colorblind dynamic about race. Uh, I was really transactional and extractive in a lot of my sexual relationships. I didn't have a lot of self awareness, and uh, I had this. I had a series of moments in my life, but um, one that I'll really highlight was uh, when I was 25. I was in a relationship with a much older woman, and um, it ended really badly, and there was violence in the breakup um, between both of us. But I was violent, and I had been violent, and no one had ever been violent to me.
Hmm.
But the context around that dynamic was me being out of integrity in a lot of ways. I had let myself go. I'd let my body go. It was radically out of integrity for me to be with this person, to be
Hmm.
living with her. Like I was not in that relationship for reasons that were in line with my values. It was much more about like having an experience or um, an adventure than it was about like cultivating love. We were radically like on different pages. Um, it was a fundamentally transactional and extractive way of being in relationship, and I was in the wrong career, in the wrong path. I was drinking. I was drunk at that time. Like I was really out of integrity in a lot of facets of my life. And in all the therapy and counseling that I did to try to make sense of that experience, what emerged, like, I didn't have some like big trauma in my childhood that I could point to.
Sure.
I was abused, now I've abused,
Right.
right? Which is a truism or a saying in the restorative justice community, right? Like the first act of violence that we commit is never one that we are inflicting. In
Hmm.
my case, it was. Like I did not receive violence.
Hmm.
Argument that being raised white, privileged, and
Sure.
is itself a form of like alienation. I don't. I mean, fine, okay, but like no, like I.
Yeah.
But what I was someone who was really not connected to his values
Hmm.
in that moment. What I was someone who had like not grounded at all in a sense of like examining my own life and being like, whoa, I need to proactively make changes. I was riding life and like letting things kind of happen and getting drunk and getting high often to avoid even the discomfort of examining my own life.
Hmm.
And that was really, really informative. It helped show me what it looked like to really fuck up and cause harm. It taught me that even the most well-intentioned, privileged, loving, liberal people, I've always gotten the feedback from everybody in my life of how loving and sweet and wonderful a man I am. Even someone as wonderful as me can really cause harm, can really cause harm. And that helped set me on a path of self-examination. And then 10 years later, I'd failed at, failed at my most recent nonprofit job, and Trump had just gotten elected,
Hmm.
gotten fired,
Hmm.
really changed. I was back out of shape and like out of relationship with my body. I still hadn't gotten into like any kind of like dynamic of respect and love with my body. I went on a self improvement journey. Finally, took the time to like at 35 at this point
Hmm.
to my body, do a bunch of self work, and I found coaching. I found that coaching path. I found an incredibly influential anti-racism mentor
Hmm.
um, who helped, who taught me what it looked like not just to be in integrity, but to restore integrity when I'm out of integrity.
Hmm.
To consciously get back into integrity, and sometimes to use other people as witnesses or to ask other people to be witnesses. Sometimes this extends into an apology, right?
Hmm.
Or to repair or restoration. But the fundamental orientation is not, oh, I've fucked up or made a mistake, let me apologize. The orientation is, I'm a person of integrity,
Yeah.
and when I'm out of integrity, I restore it. My
Hmm.
commitment is not to never ever make a mistake. My commitment is to proactively minimize my mistakes. And when I do make a mistake, catch it early. And if I can't catch it, welcome it when it's pointed out to me and then repair.
Right. Yeah, it
That's
makes me yeah, it makes me think a lot about what with meditation, right? Like that same practice of bringing your attention back to your breath, and like that is what you're doing in meditation is focusing on your breath, but there are large periods of that time often where your attention is off of your breath and is simply noticing and coming back and kind of restoring that. And it sounds like a similar practice for integrity, where it's like the goal of, if you want to call it like a game, is to be integrous 100% of the time, but knowing that you won't be, and like bringing yourself back in alignment with that.